There are a few universal human principles that can be found right across the world, regardless of what culture you live in. The first obvious human value is the value of love. In our culture, you will often hear these kind of pithy statements such as love is love, that there is an assumption, and a fairly good one, that humans will value, will celebrate, will promote the concept of love. Now, defining love is an altogether different question, but at least at some superficial level, we can recognize the fact that humans value the concept of love. Now, the second thing, and another thing that humans universally value, is the concept of justice. When crimes are committed, when wrongs have been done, when things have been broken and destroyed by bad behavior, there is something within the human heart that cries out for justice, for perpetrators to be punished, for that which was lost and broken to be restored. Justice is also a cry of the human heart. Every human has within them a desire for love and a demand for justice. And we consider these two values good. And today in the Christian calendar, it is known as Good Friday. Why? Why should Good Friday be called Good Friday? Usually the birth of an individual is considered good, or the anniversary, or if you go back to the very first day, a wedding day, days like that are deemed good. We don't often talk about the death of an individual being good, not least of which, if the conditions surrounding that death is horrific. And what Christians call Good Friday is this: a Jewish rabbi nailed to a Roman cross, beaten, bloodied, bruised, gasping for breath, and then dying. And that is called Good Friday. How on earth could that be considered good? In fact, we could go a little bit further, because the claim of this man, Jesus of Nazareth, was actually that no one would take his life from him, but that he would willingly lay it down. So that Jesus actually goes to this cross. He is not going to the cross coerced. He does not need to be persuaded. The Bible would actually say he sets his face like flint to the task at hand, and he willingly lays down his life. How on earth could that be considered good? One of the earliest Christian thinkers and writers was a man called Paul, called in some sections as Saint Paul or the Apostle Paul. Apostle just simply means a sent one. Paul has a remarkable story. He is someone that went from being a persecutor of the church to being a leader in the church. And the turning point in Paul's life was his claim that he encountered this Jewish Messiah, Jesus. The one of whom he once hated, he now came to know. He claimed that this Messiah was indeed resurrected again as the King of the universe, and that he was worthy of following. Now, because of that, because of what we call Easter Sunday, Paul wants Christian followers and thinkers, with the other apostles and leaders of the church, to rethink what happened on what we call Good Friday. If Sunday happened, that changes everything about the nature of the incident on Friday. And it is much more than a form of Roman capital punishment. Much more is going on at this cross that deems it good. Well, what is it? Paul wrote a lot about the cross, to the extent that he even called it his boast. And one of his most important letters, a letter to the church in Rome, Paul talks about the cross from a number of perspectives. And one of the first perspectives that Paul writes about is that the church, or the cross rather, shows us a God of justice. The cross, according to Paul, is proof that God is just. Now, it is actually impossible to talk about justice without talking about some sort of standard of what is deemed right and what is deemed wrong. And as Paul talks about God's justice, he will use another phrase quite often actually in Romans, and he will refer to God's righteousness. What is deemed right? What is God's standard? And in fact, as Paul writes this section in Romans, he lets us know that it doesn't actually matter whether someone adheres to any sort of religious system or not, regardless if this righteousness is revealed in God's law or even implanted on the human conscience, that we have just this desire, an inherent desire, and an inherent knowledge of what is right or wrong. The language that Paul uses is that every single human being has missed the mark. We have fallen short of God's standard of righteousness. The problem of God's righteousness is that it reveals that every single one of us is unrighteous, living in God's world as humans made in his image, with dignity and with value and with worth, who've been created to know him. We've turned our back in God's world, and as God's righteousness reveals, we are unrighteous people. And because of that, we face justice. And it's interesting, isn't it? When we've been offended, we would cry out for justice. But when we are the offenders, justice is actually quite a frightening thing. And the justice that is demanded is death. Paul refers to it as our wage. It's what we've earned. And the severity of the justice is directly linked to the severity of the crime. And our problem is that we do not know how good and how righteous and how just God is, which then sheds a spotlight on how bad and how wicked we are. We're living in God's world, avoiding him. And because of that cosmic travesty, the wages is death. And at the cross of Jesus, Jesus dies. Now, that is not all Paul says about the cross. Not only does he view it from the perspective of God's justice, God is upholding justice, he also, from another perspective, lets us know that it's also a revelation of love. Paul will write that God demonstrates, or God shows his love toward us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Paul lets us know that the cross is a manifestation of love. The dying for us, the dying shows us the justice part, the for us reveals us the love part. So the question is, how do these two universal human principles of love and justice come together? If you've lived long enough in the context of interpersonal relationships, you will at some stage discover what it means to be hurt, what it means to be offended, what it means to be wronged. And if you are in that interpersonal relationship, there is an aspect and a call to work out a concept of forgiveness, which, by the way, is a very radical concept and is ultimately rooted in the teachings of Jesus, even to love enemies. And in order to forgive someone, something has to be done with that wrong that's been against you. And so in order for you to forgive, what you have to do is to absorb that wrong. You have to absorb the justice, the anger, the just anger that you would have toward an individual. You absorb that in yourself. You take that in order to bring the relationship on, to bring forgiveness, reconciliation, and restoration. So what you experience in those moments is a very strange combination of both justice and love. In order to bring back that relationship, you show love to that individual, but in order to do that, you have to in some sort of way satisfy your own justice. And in the cross of Jesus Christ, that's exactly what God does. In Jesus, our sin, our rebellion, and the justice that was due us is laid upon Jesus by God himself. He absorbs it in the person of Jesus. He absorbs the justice. He satisfies his justice in order to show us love, in order to bring us back, which means that this good God that we were created to know, that we were made to know, that God can be known. Our fractured relationship with our Creator can be mended, can be brought back into harmony again through the good cross of Jesus Christ, a cross in which God shows his justice and a cross in which God shows his love. This is why Christians can call this day Good Friday. Because love, which we acknowledge as a universal good thing, and justice, which is a universal good thing, come together at the cross of Jesus. We at the Way Church would love to invite you to our service this Sunday morning in the town hall at 11 o'clock on Easter Sunday, as we would celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, which guarantees that the work on Friday was accepted and completed on our behalf. This might be a great opportunity for you to explore these things further. If you happen to watch this video and you're a little bit further out than the local area, please still do contact us. We'd love to try and connect you even with maybe a local church closer to you. But we want to end in this video to invite you to our service even this Sunday. It's a high point in the Christian calendar as the church celebrates that there is hope beyond the grave, and that hope finds a name, and his name is Jesus. May you have a wonderful Easter, and may, if you are not a Christian especially, think about these things deeper and come to a personal knowledge of the God who has made you, and that a God who has done all the work that is necessary for you to come to know him in a personal, deep and intimate way through what Jesus Christ has done for us. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we hope to see you very soon at the Way Church.